OK, all right, well, thanks, Murad. That was RT's Murad Gaziev. We can now talk to with Kirill Dmitriev. He is the director of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, and that is the sovereign wealth fund that backs the Sputnik V vaccine. And we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks for coming on. Firstly, in your opinion, how significant, then, is this approval of the Sputnik V vaccine by researchers in the Lancet journal?
Well, I think it's really a monumental achievement of Russia, but also a monumental achievement for the world, because there are only 3 vaccines now in the world with efficacy more than 90%. Sputnik is one of them. It is also 100% efficient against severe disease. So this is really a very important accomplishment, and we are thankful to the Lancet that showed it's not driven by politics, but it's driven by science. It's driven by desire to really do good science and find a solution. So I think it's a very important accomplishment.
And can you give us some idea then of the scope of these phase 3 trials? I mean, how many people were involved?
So 20,000 people were involved, and they were receiving vaccine to placebo 3-to-1. So basically, many more were receiving vaccine, or in many of the Western trials, people would do 1-to-1, so that fewer people would receive the vaccine. And what the trials showed is 91.6% efficacy of the vaccine, 91.8% efficacy for actually people older than 60 years old. And also another important part of the vaccine, it's affordable and it's easy to distribute around the world. We call it humankind vaccine because it can be stored at +2, +8 versus -70 degrees Celsius required by some US vaccines. And it costs half or 1/3 of the US vaccine. So when you combine safety, efficacy, price, and logistics, you really have what I believe is the best vaccine in the world, and many scientists in the world agree.
So are you anticipating then a big sort of rush now by customers and countries to get hold of Sputnik V?
Well, already Sputnik V is registered in 16 countries. By the end of next week, I think it will be registered in 25 countries. We do have some production constraints, so this year we can probably supply only around 700 million people doses. So that means 1.4 billion of doses of the vaccine. And countries that are approaching right now, we can only supply this vaccine in May or June. So basically, we will not be the only vaccine in the world, of course. We definitely are one of the best, but countries need to have a portfolio of different vaccines, and we work with other vaccines as well. For example, we work with AstraZeneca to increase efficacy of their vaccine, and we believe the spirit of partnership and vaccine cooperation is important.
And what is holding back the production there, Kirill, with regards to Sputnik V? Is it not possible to increase production quickly, or just explain some of the constraints that you mentioned?
Yes, we are, and we already increased it massively in Russia, and we're increasing it outside of Russia in India, Brazil, China, Korea, but it just takes time. We started technology transfer to India, Brazil, Korea around November, and it's just taking time to ramp up massive production. So we will really be full speed with a foreign capacity online around April, May, and that would allow us to produce tens of millions of doses outside of Russia. And vaccination in Russia will probably be complete for people who want to complete it by May or June of this year. So we'll also have Russian capacity after May or June to be used outside of Russia as well.
There's been a lot of argument in the media, and I'm sure you've seen it too, about the distribution of vaccines. There's been an ugly spat between the EU and the UK. Just from your perspective, from Russia's perspective, what is it doing to ensure the fair distribution of Sputnik V?
Well, again, we are very much focused on this being vaccine for the mankind. So because it's affordable and it doesn't require -70 degrees, we have lots of countries in Latin America, in Middle East and Africa who will be using Sputnik V vaccine. And I think it's very important that not only rich countries get hold of the vaccines. This is really not equitable for the world. I think politicians of rich countries will try to do so, but there should be mechanisms to really have much more even and much more equal distribution of vaccine around the world. And Sputnik V is committed to this. We have already delivered vaccine to Algeria. We already delivered vaccine to Guinea. So we are delivering vaccine to Latin America, to places that are really now underserved by the vaccine producers. And we will do so because we believe that many people in the world need to have access to the vaccine, not only the rich nations.
I noticed too there's talk of a Sputnik Light vaccine as well. What's the point of that, given the success or the apparent success so far of Sputnik V?
Well, some countries also would like to have not just 2 shots of the vaccine, which we currently have, but 1 shot. And we preliminarily tested the efficacy of our 1-shot vaccine, and we believe it's around 80% for main age groups. So even 1 shot of our vaccine is more efficient than many other vaccines out there. So we will have this shot, we will be clear that it has less of an efficacy and it doesn't last as long. But for countries that want to basically fight epidemic right away, who want to give protection to people right away, Sputnik V Light, which is just our first shot, will be a solution. And again, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, for example, is just almost the same as our first shot of Sputnik V Light. So 1-shot vaccines will have a chance in the world, but they will not be the main ones, because only 2 shots provide long-lasting immunity and highest immunity possible.
We've also seen in the news over the last few days concern about mutating strains of COVID-19, in particular the South African variant. What's the evidence that Sputnik V is effective against these new strains?
So our scientists basically confirmed that based on the mutations they have explored, Sputnik V is efficient. And one of the reasons is that we use 2 different delivery mechanisms for 2 shots. And that provides us with more security and more protection against mutations. So we need to have really international cooperation and work on new mutations that are coming up. And frankly, it also requires the world to really vaccinate quickly as much of the world as possible, not just the rich nations. Because the more people are left without vaccines, the more mutations will be coming. So one of the focus should be really massive vaccination around the globe to stop the virus from mutating. But so far, Sputnik V works very well with existing mutations.
And just a timeline to finish with, when would you expect to see the eradication or perhaps the constraint of COVID-19 within Russia and then perhaps globally too?
Well, we believe that in Russia we'll have massive vaccination complete by June. So by the first half of the year, I think we will have, basically would be in a very good positive position. We believe that Europe and the US will probably finish their vaccination most part by September of this year. And then for many countries, it will take this and next year to vaccinate some of their people. So this is really a program that will not only end this year, but for Russia and some of the other nations, they would vaccinate most of the people who want to get vaccinated by Q3 of this year.
OK, look, on that note, we'll leave it, but really good to talk to you this afternoon. That was Kirill Dmytriev. He's the director of the Russia Direct Investment Fund, and that is the sovereign wealth fund that backs the Sputnik V vaccine that got approval by the Lancet today for its phase 3 trials. Thanks for coming on. And thank you for watching. We'll be back again with the headlines.